Good afternoon. How are you all? So, I'm here today to introduce you to Zana Morris. Zana is a nutritionist and the founder of Strong Nutrition, which is a company that makes wonderful supplements. I was invited to, hang on, let's just see, I was invited to trial some of the nutrients, and through that I met. It's always a right pain when you try and do this live. And you're there already, great.
I can sit quietly.
And done your proper introduction.
Or try to.
So, well, what I was going to say to everybody was that we got on very well, I think. You helped train me for a few weeks. You also advised me on diet. And we did this high protein, high fat diet for a week, and I lost 8 pounds. And that was already my target. But since then, I've lost about another 5 or 6, and I've maintained that weight over the last 2 months now. And I think my goal, because I started off being 10 stone 11, was to be, I think, 10 stone 4 to start with. Then it was 10 stone. And then I was telling all my friends, I just want to be under 10 stone. And so I'm 9 stone 13 now. And I don't necessarily want to lose any more weight, because I think there's a limit to what you can lose. My original goal had been or in my head, 9 stone 10, because that's what I weighed the day I got pregnant and the day after I gave birth. But I think I'm a lot more muscly now than I was then. So that is probably unrealistic. Plus, I'm a lot older. Anyway, welcome. I'm very happy to see you, and I'm very happy for everyone who's joined us. And I will save this if anyone wants to see it again. And hopefully lots of other people will watch, of course. So let's get started, because I know time runs out very quickly. So you have said on several occasions, and I've heard you say it on other lives,
it's approximately half a pound of muscle a year.
Is it a pound of muscle every year?
And it can get influenced by some things, but the general overview is half a pound of muscle a year. So it means by the time we're 60, we could have 15 pounds of muscle gone. By the time we're 70, it could be 20. Which it's extraordinary.
As I'm on that,
to be really honest,
spiral,
that to me is what aging really is. And I don't mean we all get older. We all want to get older because, you know, as we all say, what's the alternative? We hope we're getting older. It's great. But the real aging effect is the loss of sarcopenia, as they call it. It's the loss of muscle. It's protein. It's the loss of lean body mass. It's protein out of the bones, which affects the calcium. It's the muscle itself breaking down. It's protein out of the organs. It's collagen from the skin, all of that. A friend of mine used to describe it, and it's a terrible description, but really apt. It's like we're leaking protein. But so the lean body mass, yeah.
Oh, gosh. Hey, a few years ago, it sounds like I'm a yo-yo dieter. I'm not really at all, but I'd lost some weight, and I ended up just under the 10 stone, so high numbers in 9 stone. And I remember going to the gym and 3 or 4 people saying to me, please don't lose any more weight, your face has gone thin. Now, obviously, my face has gone thinner because I've lost weight.
Yes.
But I've noticed it hasn't happened as it did last time.
Good, believe it or not, good quality training with that protein, with the fat, should help retain the lean mass, if you like. Often, and this is, low-calorie diets can be a disaster. Years ago, I did a proper weigh and measure. We used to do weighs and measures in the gyms where you did the fat percentages and calipers and check for the muscle loss and all the rest. And the goal always being a muscle gain while the fat dropped. We'd one particular client that was doing a fast. She'd particularly want to do a particular fast and just asked, could we monitor what was happening? And it was like a really low calorie eating plan, if I'm being honest. It replicated that. She was importing it for health, but she was more doing it for weight loss. We didn't want her to do it, but by we, I mean myself and my trainers, but we just said, okay, fine, we'll monitor and we'll show you the results. She lost 9 pounds in about 10 days, which phenomenal. 7 pounds of it was muscle. And if you do the maths on that, that is accelerating the aging process like you can't imagine. So when we said ½ pound a year, if you go off and do these crazy low calorie diets, you could be losing more. She aged herself by 14 years.
So you're talking about the body, but talking about the face, you see people with
that's part of it. Yeah, it's that we're losing the density of it, if you like. Naturally, definitely. So, now, I'm not going to say, oh, we're going to resolve it and all look 20. I mean, it would be wonderful, but it's not going to happen, at least not from the natural forms as we do now. But yes, you can make it very different. Anything that helps push protein back into the body is pushing it back everywhere. So this is where the weight training, if you like, comes in, or the short high intensity training, which have this lovely natural hit on our growth hormone, which is a hormone we produce in abundance when we're in our teens and early 20s, but tends to decline with age. But we produce it all through our lives, provided the nutrition's right, and we train accordingly. So that it's the weight training and the short high intensity training that seems to really help release it. And that's a hormone that pushes protein back into the body, if you like. And that's not just going to work. So if you do squats with weights, it's not just the legs you're working out. Weirdly, you're working out the face too, because the protein's going to go back into that entire body. The body isn't going to spot check and go, I'm only putting it into the thigh. It's going to go into everything. So yes, you really can make a difference. You can help tighten things up again. You can make an improvement at any age. You really can.
Okay, that's good to know. So, and obviously I'm mainly, and I guess a lot of my followers are sort of menopausal and beyond. And therefore, and it's this sort of not sweet spot of menopause, I was going to say that's totally wrong choice of words, but the kind of deterioration and the fears and everything that goes around everything
Can
else.
I throw one positive? And there's a few positives to things. There's one really interesting positive we used to find in the gyms when it came to menopause, is that for some women, the change in hormonal balance, for some, makes them stronger. For some. So it's not necessarily all bad. Now, obviously, the goal is to keep it lovely and balanced. I'm not being dismissive now. I'm really not. But actually, there can be slight benefits to it. There can be. We sometimes notice menopausal women could be stronger than their counterparts in their 20s and 30s.
So we're talking about exercise. So which exercises in particular,
honestly
when you're sort of
love
50 plus,
and
should you be
cannot recommend enough weight training. Now, I'm going to say good weight training, which is such a generalized word to use. But by good weight training, what I mean is really good form and as heavy as you can lift within that form. So in other words, you want to lift weights. You can't, and I say this carefully now, I need to make sure I've got this clarified. You can't lift enough weight almost, provided the form is correct. So for some, that may mean stepping back a bit and getting all the muscles working evenly, making sure the glutes and the hamstrings and the lower back and the abs are all engaging the way they're supposed to. And once you get to that point where your body's working lovely and evenly, then keeping the correct form on the weights. Honestly, good heavy weights just really stimulates that whole hormonal balance from head to toe. It really does. Think about it this way. If we're saying that we could have lost as much as 20 pounds of muscle by the time we're 70, that's a heck of a lot. It's going to take a long time to get that back and then get muscly. Even if you only lost 10 pounds of muscle in that time, you're not gaining anything, you're recovering. And I think that's almost the word you want to get across, as in for me, you kind of want to get across, is that once we get past 40, we're really looking at muscle recovery and protection. rather than muscle gain as such. It's very hard to gain. You can, but oh my gosh, that's a whole project onto itself to get all of that recovered back and gain more. That takes a lot of focus and a lot of work. It's doable, but that would be a whole big project. Initially, just think in terms of protection and recovery. Even if you got £5 back, you will feel completely different, as you know. I mean, from the training you do, you look different, but you'll also feel different, stronger within yourself.
Absolutely, yeah. And I do. I mean, you know, I've been strength training. Well, I've been doing it for the last 4 years, really, but particularly going to the gym since last November. And I certainly have toned up. I can tell by my arms. I used to not like to wear sleeveless tops because I thought I had fat arms, and I saw a picture of myself the other day and I thought, my God, shoulders actually are quite toned now. You know, it's a nice feeling to be like that. And I think, again, and you know, because I've talked about this, I had criticism from people, why are you trying to lose weight at your age and things like that.
And
but it was for me.
Can I just say, because there's a lovely question from a Claire here, do you put on weight when you weight train, as muscle weighs more than fat? Now, I'm sorry, excuse me for the joke I'm about. It's not quite a joke, I'm smiling as I'm saying this. A pound of muscle weighs the same as a pound of fat, but I love the line, everybody says that muscle weighs more than fat. A pound of muscle is smaller than a pound of fat, so you're smaller. But exactly what you're saying there, Linda, and what Claire is saying here is, it's actually not even about the weight loss, it's about the fat loss. And there is a chance, if you've very little fat to lose, or if you're not changing the nutrition around, and that will come into play, and you just train, then there is a very good chance your weight could go up, but your shape will change. And when you mentioned the arms, I love the arms. We used to do weighs and measures on everything. So you get the measuring tape, good old fashioned measuring tape, and measure all the body parts. And what you always notice with the arms with most women was the size of the arm often remained the same. You could do all sorts of nutritional plans and training with them, but the shape, oh my gosh, it was like a different arm if you put the two side by side by the time you're finished. Because once you took a little layer of fat off and put a little layer of muscle on, you just had a different arm. It just looked completely different. And it is about that. It's about sculpting, it's about shape, it's about strength. And it really is less about the scales and much more about the fat loss and kind of the belly fat and that kind of thing. So, yes.
I know what your answer to this is, but lots of people say I'm too busy to go to the gym.
Forget the gym, just train.
What is your answer to
there's
them?
Lots of ways to start. And there's an insane amount of research now showing that really short bursts of training makes a big difference. And oh my gosh, particularly if you do it regularly. And as you know, Linda, that short burst could be as little as 1 minute. So there really isn't an excuse. Now, by weight training, we're often talking about resistance training. So weight training, you might actually put weights on your shoulders, but resistance training could be your body weight. Doing squats with your own body weight, or if that's too tough to begin with, just sitting down in a low sofa and standing up again is a squat effectively. Or just doing partial movements, doing press-ups with your own body weight. Your knees could be on the floor, or literally leaning sideways at an angle against a countertop when you're waiting for a kettle to boil. Rep out as many as you can. With high intensity training, what we really mean is get out of breath, get the heart rate up, and just feel out of breath at the end of it. And honestly, if people only did 1 minute blitz, so for example, as many squats as you can do in a minute, that could be 20, it could be 50, as many press-ups as you can do in a minute, and that could be 10 or it could be 40, if you know what I mean. You just build it up. You will notice a difference to your heart rate, the oxygen uptake. It has an impact on those hormones, which starts helping the body switch into muscle building as opposed to muscle loss. And it seems to have an impact on insulin and stabilizing that, so targeting belly fat. So it can be as little as that.
So have you got any tips on motivation of that? Because, you know, I pay to go to a gym. And
I mean, you hit the nail on the head there. One big motivation, one big reason people often use trainers or classes where they have to book into is because they don't want to let anyone down. And that helps. Oh, there's a few ways of looking at this, and you could take it from the good old-fashioned psychology route where you start visualizing outcomes and seeing yourself. I think a very fast route, and I don't want to go into this too much because it's a slightly different field, but it is relevant and it's a great question. is a thing we used to call memory management, where you'd literally pull out times in your life when you felt at your strongest or fittest or in your best shape. And you in a way draw them out. You can literally take out a pen and paper and write out what it was like at that time. And almost draw that bit, pull that to the front of your mind of what it felt like, and what it, and because you've done it before, you know you can do it again. Your brain relates to it, it connects to it, because in a way it is you, it's part of you. It may not be you right now this second, but it's part of who you are and your history, if you like. And what you focus on, and I mean fully, it really does impact what you feel like doing next. It is what motivates you. And I think the big issue can be, the focus can be on, oh my God, I'm out of shape first and I need to do something about it, which actually is kind of the wrong way around, rather than focusing on the fact that, okay, this is what it feels like to be in shape. And suddenly there's a different sort of drive to do that. So if you find it super hard to motivate yourself to kind of get yourself into the gym, do that. And if you can combine it with those 1 minutes, honestly, if you did that 1 minute every day for 2 or 3 weeks, I honestly would guarantee after 2 to 3 weeks, you feel stronger, you feel a bit fitter, and then you feel like doing something else. You kind of want to, you kind of have the energy in you to want to do more. So it's almost kick off in the bite size and just do it regularly. And everybody has a minute. And if you want to do a bit more, you could do 2 to 3 minutes. If you walk, then suddenly do a much faster walk. If you like a gentle run, do a quick sprint, and literally seconds, 10, 15 seconds of one, do that 2 or 3 times. If you cycle, do 2 or 3, 10 or 15 seconds sprint cycles. If you swim, do 2 or 3 sprints in the water. So that gets the high intensity bit up. It doesn't have to be a lot. You know, in total, the high intensity bit could equate to an entire minute in total. You could break it up to 4, 5 or 6 lots of 10 seconds. It's not a huge amount. But it's just short and then regular. And it honestly will make a difference to how the whole body feels. And then that lifts you. As you know, when you train regularly, it's like it lifts you rather than you having to lift it.
Okay, so this is a question that I'm a bit confused about, and as I know we've talked about it, and my husband is type 1 diabetic. My daughter's already also been told that she is insulin resistant, but I don't really understand what this insulin resistance is, and I've never heard of it from a non-diabetic person or situation until probably this year. So can you explain to us what it is?
I probably need to be careful with what I'm about to say next, but if you're to ask me in a corner my true belief in it, I honestly believe most people are borderline insulin resistant, if not actually insulin resistant. If there's any weight around the belly, it means your body's releasing more insulin than it probably should, because all weight around the belly is related to the body releasing insulin. And what tends to happen is, I mean, what it really means is, if you eat a little square of chocolate when you're 15, there's a tiny bit of insulin that the body releases to get that sugar out of the bloodstream. And it needs to. The insulin is essential to do this. As you will know from your husband, a type 1 diabetic is the opposite, where they're not releasing any, and that's dangerous. We do need it. Insulin's great. It's essential. What happens as we age, for multiple reasons, and I'll very quickly run into them, is you take a similar square of chocolate when you're perhaps in your mid-40s, and rather than releasing a tiny bit of insulin, the body's resistant now to the insulin. It's not listening to it. So it has to release more, and then possibly a bit more to get that sugar out of the bloodstream. So suddenly the same square of chocolate, this is why calorie counting is potentially a nonsense for so many people, because that square of chocolate has the same amount of calories, but a 15-year-old eating it versus a 45-year-old versus a 75-year-old, they'll all have different impacts on their body depending on how much insulin the body releases in response to it. So it's not about the calories in that chocolate, it's about the insulin. So what tends to happen is diet, as most people will know, will play a big role in it. Too much sugar, often over not just weeks and not even months, but years and decades. So the carbohydrates break into the sugars themselves can build up, so the body gets less responsive and it has to hit more insulin out to get the response to it. But perimenopause, menopause, as estrogen levels fluctuate and change, apparently that also causes us to become a bit more insulin resistant. And stress does it too. Stress has this lovely impact on, I say that obviously tongue in cheek, Cortisol is one of the hormones that gets released when we're under stress. And one of its job, I always describe it a bit like a coffee shot. Cortisol's job is to get us with the power and the energy, as is adrenaline actually, to deal with a sudden emergency, if you like. Adrenaline in particular is the same. But one of the things cortisol does to get the energy, to give us the energy, if you like, to fight or to run, is it attacks our lovely muscle, which you mentioned at the beginning is already depleting. Stress accelerates that one, by the way. The cortisol attacks the lovely glycogen and muscle stores to break it down, to find the sugars within it and get those sugars into the bloodstream, so that now we've got a fuel and we can fight or we can run. But if we don't fight or run, which is more often than not the case, the body has to release insulin to get that sugar out, because it's a poison if it just sits there. So stress can cause the body to release more insulin. Perimenopause, menopause does it in men. The andropause can have an impact. And then obviously decades of eating a certain way, where some might argue it's a bit too carbohydrate and sugar based. And as a result, we go through life, and each year almost we're producing more insulin for the same foods. So it's the main reason why what you did when you were in your late 20s or early 30s and mid 30s, you used to work a dream, and then suddenly you hit your mid 40s, mid 50s, mid 60s, and it's not working at all. It's that.
Yeah. So I want to talk about intermittent fasting, but I'm just going to ask the next question first, which is kind of follows on from that, because again, menopause, post-menopause, a lot of women anyway, have fat around their middle. And, you know, whilst I've lost this weight and I've been taking pictures of myself, and I've lost, I think, nearly 2 inches around my waist, and certainly my clothes are a lot looser, I've still got, you know, not big, but I've got love handles, and I've still got fat.
There's two things that you're always looking at. So one is still the insulin game, and nutritionally, I suppose there's a few ways of looking at this. The obvious is the less sugar and carbohydrates in the diet. Now, you will know this, Linda, because you've gone through all of this, but the less sugar and carbohydrates in the diet, the more you're going to help stabilize the insulin. Strict high fat and, funny enough, lower protein plans are very good for flatlining insulin, but that you do want to get the ratios right. And that's superb, again, for hitting that middle section. Intermittent fasting is another one that helps stabilize insulin levels, and particularly towards the end, there's a conversion as the body flips into burning fat as a fuel. And they're all very useful techniques from the nutritional side. Then you've got the training side. And if you can, and this works superbly well, it's really getting in with as high intensity as you're able to do, not necessarily long, but good, short, high intensity training, or really good weight training sessions, which are equally high intensity, quite frankly. Do squats with weights and you'll find you run out of breath quite quickly. So it's really getting those. So, and I think you may be doing this already, but it's not. So I almost divide training into different categories. You've got the equivalent of walks, potentially Pilates, potentially yoga, which is sort of the lighter aerobic, which I just feel are very good for us. Circulation improves. It's good for the heart. It's good for the soul. It's got lots of benefits. And then so that's sort of parking that. They may or may not do anything for the love handles. They may, but they wouldn't be the way I'd go about it. The other side then is the bursts. I say this cautiously because I wouldn't recommend anyone start with this, but if you're somebody who trains, when you feel queasy, it's a good sign that you've really jumped up the levels, if you like. So if you train to feeling queasy, then you've got it. That's where there's that lovely hormonal hit. That's where you've pushed the fitness kind of to the edge, if you like. Now that works extraordinarily well on belly fat. Now that's the extreme end of it. You don't have to go that far to get that result, but that's sort of giving you the two ends of the spectrum, if you like. So the more you can ease your high intensity session. Now I'm talking about, I said 1 minute, probably 10 to 12 up to 15 minutes is perfect for a general high intensity session. I'm not talking about even half-hour sessions here. So keeping it in that realm. Or your lovely weight training, where you can get nice weights on your shoulders if your backs and knees are all feeling strong enough and good enough, and you get your glutes kicking in, and do some lovely squats or do some lovely lunges. A leg press with machines is great because it can hold you into position. and really do as heavy a weight as you're able to do for about 15 to 20 repetitions, and maybe lighten it and do that 3 times. And that has a huge impact on those hormonal levels and the belly fat and the circle around the middle.
So on to intermittent fasting, which you recommended to me, and I've been doing now for, I guess, 2 months. And I have to say that the advice you gave me the last time we did a live, which was just before I was going to America, was, you know, don't beat yourself up if you can't do it. And that was excellent advice. And actually, I was concerned because my friends I was staying with, she loves baking cakes and bread and things like that, but she was fairly controlled. She is a nutritionist and pediatrician, so I mean, I was in a good place really, and I managed more or less to keep to my diet, and we didn't drink much alcohol, so that was also positive. But it set me on a good trail, so I've tried to be very good during the week, and if at the weekend we go out for coffee and there's a piece of cake there, I'll eat it and I'll have a glass of wine. And on last Friday night I drank enough wine that I woke up with a headache, but you know, it was a birthday. So that has been, that was the best recommendation, along with the fasting, and I find it really good, and I certainly think that's helped me maintain the weight that I managed to get to. But on Instagram, you know, this sort of listening thing, you suddenly find you've got loads of ads about intermittent fasting coming up. And they're, not that I've clicked on them all, but I've seen some that says, you know, at a certain age you should be doing 12-12, and then some say it should be 14-8, and et cetera, et cetera. So I'm obviously in general doing the 16-8. But if I find at 14 or 15 hours, it's happened twice actually, so it's not often that I felt a bit lightheaded, then I have gone and had something to eat. But I do realise that, you know, I don't work, so, or not properly, so it's very easy for me to control the times that I eat, even though I've discovered that as the evenings are getting lighter, it would be that we're more likely to be doing something later, so that margin is much harder to keep to. But what is that sort of, you know, if you're doing 12-12 or whatever, is that okay? Because I'm sure there'll be people listening who work who will say, well, I couldn't possibly do 16-8. And certainly my daughter, who's a teacher, said, Mum, I can't do it because I leave home at just before 7 in the morning and I don't get home till 5. My husband
it's
works
one of
till
those
8.
where it depends what you want to do. Like, it's okay to do anything, as in genuinely, and that's all, you know, that clearly is the case. You can't change the benefits to match what you want to do, unfortunately. I wish we could, but unfortunately you can't. So you'll get different benefits and there's different approaches. So for example, I have occasionally put clients onto low-fat diets for very specific reasons. They may be health ones, they may be shape ones, and they might be a high-protein diet. Now, I think it's quite hard to do intermittent fasting on a low-fat diet, as an aside. I almost don't recommend or encourage it because I think everything digests too quickly. In the same vein, if you're looking to do a longer fast, and assuming your scheduling allows for it as opposed to just how you feel, then the way to do it successfully and effortlessly is to make sure the evening before. So remember, your day starts the evening before. It doesn't actually start that morning. How you feel that morning is going to be determined by what you did the previous day. So if you get enough protein in the evening, particularly the night before, enough fat, but particularly protein, that tends to carry you very sweetly through, quite effortlessly, so if you ate at 7 or 8, you'll find it quite effortless to stay through till 11 or 12 o'clock. And it doesn't matter what you're doing. You could be training, you could be working. I mean, fasting is one of those things where that's the one, and that's a little trick, if you like, to help you do it. And it makes it, I think, much, much easier. Equally, now I'm not recommending someone does this, just to be clear. I'm just saying the nutcasey things I did in my lifetime because I was interested in all of this. There's benefits, but this is not a recommendation, please. But in my early 20s, I was at university, I did a 9-day water fast. I was still going in and out to university every day, and I had a part-time job. And I only remember on day 9 running up the 4 flights of stairs to the top. I was in Trinity in Dublin, and my department, my Spanish department, was on the 4th floor, and we weren't allowed to use the lift in those days. It was only the professors and teachers. The students had to go up the stairs. And I got to the top of the top floor and thought, what is wrong with me today? I'm out of breath. And then I realized I haven't eaten in 9 days. So my point being, and this is speaking to somebody, I mean, oh my gosh, people do Ramadan every year. Point being, people fast. Your body gets used to it. It switches. It's a habit, if you like. Now, I'm not running out saying recommending people do what I just said there. Genuinely, I'm just saying how the body can switch and respond and get used to it. So the 2 things I'd say for those whose scheduling allows it is, first, just do it gradually. As in, you don't have to suddenly go, right, tomorrow I'm doing 16 hours. You could say, tomorrow I'm just going to do 12. The next day it might be 12 and a half. The next day I might get it up to 13, and gently extend it. And the second is, as I said, get that protein in the evening. A high carb meal, if I had pasta of an evening and a big pasta meal, I'd find it really hard to fast the next day. I'll be hungry. And I'll be hungry by 9 o'clock, whereas ordinarily I could go till 11 or 12. So that, I think, does make a difference.
Actually, sort of historically, people like Italians ate their pasta at lunchtime, and in the evening they had things like cold meats and salad.
There would be a touch of that. So it's just a case of determining, you know, your rhythm, if you like, with it. And as for the benefits, there are supposedly benefits to 16 hours over 14 and 14 hours over 12. And what it is it's not just the gap without eating, which is wonderful. So even 12 hours is still really helpful, really is. But what the body's processes begin to shift and change. Releases of leptin, the body switches into converting fats, and that happens towards the 14th, 15th and 16th hour more than it would in hour 12. So there's a little more of a conversion, if you like. So it's suddenly fats that your body can't really get access and make use of as energy. It's converting so that they're more readily available for energy. So my personal reason for doing intermittent fasting, it's a little bit about a belly fat, but it's a lot more about my steady energy. I find my overall energy is better, just daily. My stamina is better. Weirdly, I think I train better. So it's almost the opposite to what we might have traditionally thought that it would take away from it. I find it helps. That hormonal balance, I think, helps the body's repair mode, build muscle. So as we age, I think there's a benefit to fasting, but within reason, if you know what I mean. I don't mean just jump out there and do crazy fasts. Build them up gradually, get the nutrition right the rest of the time.
I certainly think that advice to eat protein, that's worked for me. And on the occasions when I have had less, it's been more of a struggle not to eat the next day. And if it has, I've eaten, to be honest. But just continuing that. So one thing you say is, you shouldn't snack, you should have it as a meal.
Oh my goodness. Now, I always give this example, but for me it was the innocence of my request that always makes me laugh in retrospect, knowing the answer. When I spoke to the suppliers of supplements for strong nutrients, and this was going back years ago, I just wanted to get some in quickly because we had a gap, but this is going back a few years in the early days when I really didn't have an understanding of how this all worked. And I put in a big order and they had a long lead time. And I said, listen, could you just get me 50 over? And they laughed. They said, it makes no difference. For us to produce 50 containers of something takes as much energy, for want of a better word, as to do 50,000. In other words, we still have to clear the whole chain, if you like. The machines have to get cleared down, washed down, sprayed down, hosed down. Everything needs to be reset up for your supplement. So it doesn't matter if it's 50 or 50,000. And if we could think of our bodies in a similar way, you've got this whole digestive system almost literally from head to toe. It starts with the enzymes in the mouth. You've got the whole hydrochloric acid in the stomach. So you've got all the enzyme game going on, all the gut bacteria, all the microbiomes, all the hormonal production and release, and et cetera, that goes on. Every time you eat, you're kicking it all into action. So the body's never getting a time to use its energy resources into repair and recovery, if you like. immunity, all the things we need. If you're constantly eating, your resources are going into digestion. And we just need to sort of, I mean, almost think of it as electricity. You don't have an unlimited supply. There's so much going into the production, it's not going into everything else. So food really, I think, should be considered eat, gap, eat, gap. Eat as often as you need. Now, I have some clients that need to eat 5 times a day. So it wouldn't be saying don't eat if you're, eat if you're hungry, but don't graze. Don't graze. It'll deplete you of energy. Yeah. It'll probably lead to belly fat. You won't feel very well. It won't do your digestion any good. You'll never do that again. She'll never ask that question again. She goes on too long.
Okay, so what was... we better get
what
on.
Made me started? Originally, actually, the main reason I started was I had this little gym in Harley Street, and I used to recommend supplements everywhere. My background was originally supplements. I ran a health store in Galway in Ireland, and originally I trained as a nutritionist in my early 20s. Actually, it was my late teens. Gosh, anyway, a while ago. So my background and my love was always the nutrition and the supplements. And I say love because genuinely, I just love the fact you could make such a difference with people in such a short amount of time when you spotted what the gap was. So it wasn't so much just about taking pills for the sake of it. It was like realizing there's these gaps, and if you fill it, oh my gosh, you can sort of almost change someone's life. And in a weird way, it's quite exciting. So with the gym, I used to have these little supplements that I would recommend that I'd been using for years, that I used to recommend in the health stores in Ireland, but a lot of them weren't that easy to get. So the main one, dare I say, was the casein protein that we do in Strong. It's surprisingly difficult to find. And when I started with the gyms nearly 20 years ago now, I couldn't find a single company that did it. It just wasn't being done. Eventually, I think I discovered one. There was a company in Ireland that I used to work with that did it, but I couldn't find anywhere in the UK. And casein was the only protein I really rated for the results people could get with it. Now, for anyone listening, it's not vegan. It is vegetarian. It's the same protein you get in cheese or yogurt. It's a really... almost like tough protein. It's slowly released. The body breaks it down lovely and slowly, so you don't get an insulin raise. So great to avoid the insulin resistance, and great for targeting belly fat. But because it's so slow release, you stay fuller for longer, and the body can make great use of it. It's got plenty of time to digest it and absorb it. So you really do firm up and tone up with it. And out of all the proteins I've ever used, it's the only one I found really, really worked. And it was almost impossible to get. So it was almost around that one that I realized sooner or later, I'm going to have to start getting these in for clients. And that was really the kickoff. It was the supplements that I couldn't find as readily initially that I seriously rated, and were the only ones I wanted my clients to be using. And that was the main reason. And it was casein first. The second one, which you can get but is very rarely recommended, was the chill pill, the vitamin B5 for stress. I think it's extraordinarily good for the adrenals and extraordinarily helpful for sleep. I mean, really, like, I'd rate it almost above magnesium, and I rate magnesium very high. So I just found they were ones that I just found could almost transform a client. And they were just small little hacks that had such a big impact.
So on the chill pill one, because it's vitamin B5, is there any
the
one that
overview with supplements
like
generally for a pregnant woman? First 3 months of pregnancy, the general rule is don't take anything unless it's very specifically being recommended. Thereafter, in theory, yes, I'm always inclined to say just double check, generally speaking. That said, chill pill, oh my gosh, vitamin B5, it's extraordinarily mild. So you can take it pretty much, and I say again with a proviso, pretty much any medication. But again, if somebody's on medications or they've any sort of serious conditions, health conditions, always, always, always just run it past doctors, because it's good for them to know if you're on other things. There's so many new drugs that come out and so many new things that people are recommended that from the nutritional side, we won't always keep on top of them all. And it's good for doctors to understand you're taking this as well. In every case I've ever come across, the doctors always said yes. They've either said they can't see the point, but go for it, or yes, definitely go for it. But I would still always recommend do check. That said, B5 is extraordinarily mild. And it has such a lovely impact on so many processes in the body. It's essential for digestion, the breakdown of proteins, of fats, of carbohydrates. But it is really, and actually, if you think of skin and hair, you think of all the pantopens, your shampoos and your creams. That's B5 they're talking about. This is us just taking it internally. But it seems to have a lovely effect on adrenals, on mood. We used to call it the happy vitamin when I studied nutrition going back some time ago, because of its impact on mood.
But there are quite a few medics, Tim Spector being one, who are saying
the supplement
you don't
makes
need
a difference to how you feel.
So how would you answer someone like that?
End of. Because a supplement, now by supplement here, I'm talking about vitamins, minerals, amino acids, so sort of very food-based ones that you get in multiple sources. I could give all the reasons why I think we do need them, but the simplest answer to that is, if you, for example, take vitamin B5 and or magnesium and find now you're sleeping through the night, your body's natural process is to sleep through the night. These aren't putting you to sleep. There's nothing in them that makes you sleep. All they do is help with the regulation or the normalization of cortisol levels, melatonin levels in the case of the magnesium. All they're doing is getting your body's processes working as they should. So if you, for example, start taking vitamin C and suddenly find you don't get colds or flus anymore, then maybe you needed the vitamin C. So that's the fastest answer I can give you. I can give you a lot of other reasons, a very big long list as to why we might need them in this day and age, but that's the fast one. If you feel it, your body's using it.
So somebody said to me that they bought your vanilla casein protein, and since then their doctors put them on a FODMAP.
Can they define what they mean by a FODMAP diet?
To still take it?
I'd need to know more specifically what they mean and the whys. So I'd need to probably know more why he was put on it, just more detail before I can say conclusively. But what I will say is casein protein is no different than, it's just the protein part of your cheese or your yogurt or your milk. So it doesn't contain the lactose and it doesn't contain the fat. It's just the protein part of it. So if you're allowed, for example, if somebody is allowed dairy, they can definitely have it. If somebody's on a lactose-free diet, they can still have it. But if they're on a casein-free diet, then that's different. Now, that's usually only, and this genuinely can be the case with the casein, usually the only case where people can't do casein is genetically some can't digest casein itself. They will know. There'll be people who can't take any dairy, that they'll get kind of stomach cramps and the likes, and they won't be able to do casein either. But yes, so I suspect, very cautiously, not having enough information, I suspect you would be okay with the casein on that, but I don't want to presume. I'd need to know more detail on exactly what we meant by this diet. I have a vague idea, but exactly, and exactly the why.
Yeah, okay. So just lastly, we've talked about the chill pill, we've talked about casein. If somebody is exercising, trying to lose weight, wanting to feel better about themselves, what other supplements in your range would you suggest? What would your best four be and why?
Okay, let me do this in probably no particular order. Creatine's a very interesting one, and less about the weight loss and more about the muscle protection and the ATP production. And ATP are your energy molecules. So it is one that does seem to make a big difference, and more so as we age. Weirdly, particularly with memory and brain functioning, because our brains rely more on ATP. But my recommendation, I'm more looking at it from the muscle protection, the stamina, the recovery. And you're talking about earlier things to help you motivate you to train. The advantage of supplements like creatine. Now, you get creatine in fish and meat. It's natural. It's an amino acid compound, if you like. It's part of a protein. But with it is, if you're reasonably high, if your cells are reasonably high in creatine and you have enough, you will have more stamina to train and you'll recover faster. So it does help. So funnily enough, that would be one of my first, indirectly related to fat loss, but it isn't the primary one for fat loss. Amino Slim is definitely our best seller for the fat loss. And that's another amino acid compound. Amino acid, again, being part of your protein. You get it in fish, meat, and egg will have it in it. Chickpeas will practically have it in it. So it's in any kind of protein-based food. Amino acids all have a different impact on the body when you take them away from each other, so on their own. And the L-ornithine, which is the main ingredient of the Amino Slim, aids that natural process that goes on when we sleep or when we do high intensity training. And this is back to what we said at the very beginning. We have a natural hormonal growth hormone release, and that's the hormone that pushes the protein back into everything. And we seem to stabilize insulin, which when it stabilizes, we're able to lose fat around the belly faster. And the L-ornithine just seems to get in behind that. So people find you start losing fat around the belly, particularly in terms of inches. And that can be really helpful if your goal is the shape. I personally find it helps strength a little bit as an aside with the training, but for most, they're using it for the shape side. So there are two top ones. We've mentioned the casein, which is obviously useful as a protein if you want a way to get extra protein in without wading through lots of fish and meat, in the case, as the case may be. That said, my other two, dare I say, favorites, magnesium is a big one. There's a general consensus, and I mean across the board, not just with the nutritional industry, that, well, the soil, for example, in the UK can be low in magnesium. This answers a little bit back to your question of, do we need these supplements? If the soil is low in some of these minerals, then that can have an impact on us nutritionally. But a lot of people seem to be low in magnesium, and women in particular, oh my gosh, we benefit from it. Magnesium is involved in about 600 processes in the body. It's a lot. It's involved with the muscle kind of relaxation contraction, so great for the heart. It's great for helping us absorb and utilize our calcium, so indirectly really good for the bones. It helps regulate melatonin, which is the hormone that helps us sleep. It helps bring cortisol levels down, if you like, regulate that, which again will help you sleep because cortisol is the hormone that keeps us awake. And it also helps get rid of recycled, or should I say used estrogen, which you don't want recycling around the body. You want the body to get rid of it. And magnesium is involved with that process too. So it's one of these that really is beneficial, I just think, health-wise. If you don't sleep well, it's the first go-to, I think, to go for. And then my personal favorite is chill pill. And this is a little bit facetious, but honestly, I believe it too, though. If you drink coffee, you probably need it. The coffee and caffeine, for all the research on coffee possibly being good for us, and I'm not going to knock it because I love my coffee and it's great to think, yes, it might be doing me some good. Caffeine does punch the adrenals a little bit. It's acting a bit like cortisol. It's an artificial stimulant. It is a bit of a drug. And if the adrenals are already under a little bit of pressure, which for most people I meet, they most likely are, in so much as people are carrying a lot. We potentially work more than we did. We juggle more than we did. We used to have lovely, neat roles for individuals, and I don't want to be dismissive of anybody in any generation, but I feel now that everybody of every generation is doing every role going from care of children to grandchildren to parents to jobs to careers. There doesn't seem to be beginning and an end to any of these roles anymore. We seem to just be carrying them all. So for most people I meet, there's a stress factor going on, and the chill pill can be really helpful. And all it's doing is just nourishing the adrenals and getting them doing what they're supposed to. So sleep tends to improve, energy tends to get a bit better, mood can go up, but again, that can be very adrenal related. So that was a quick overview. I would go creatine first, Amino Slim better from the second for the shape side of it. Yep. And I would go magnesium and chill pill just for helping the sleep patterns and getting the body a bit more back into its rhythm, if you like. That would be it.
Well, thank you. I don't want to run out of time. That certainly answered a lot of my personal confusion and questions. As always, it's a joy to speak to you. And for anyone that's listening, we have a discount code, which is Linda12 until midnight on Sunday. And I will put that in my copy when I hopefully save this.
Thank you very much, Linda.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
And have a nice day.